Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our webinar, Europe and Hezbollah, a new European approach to Iran's proxy. My name is Daniel Schwammenthal, and I'm the director of the American Jewish Committee's EU office in Brussels, the Transatlantic Institute. I am delighted to introduce our great panel. We are joined today by Nicola Beer, a German member of the European Parliament and a vice president of the European Parliament from Renew Europe. Austrian member of the European Parliament for the center-right EPP, Lukas Mandl. Lukas sits on the Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee and crucially chairs the Transatlantic Friends of Israel. And live from Washington, sounds very cool to say that, we have with us Michael Doran, a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute who specializes in Middle East security issues. Mike previously served in the White House as a senior director in the National Security Council in the George W. Bush administration. Now, chance famously favors the prepared mind, ladies and gentlemen, so our timing for this webinar could not have been more perfect. As this morning, German Interior Minister Horst Seehofer banned Hezbollah's activities while heavily armed police raided several Hezbollah offices and mosques throughout the country. In 2013, following the terror attack in Bulgaria, the EU put only Hezbollah's so-called military arm on its terror list, leaving what is considered to be the political arm free to operate. AJC, including, of course, also our Berlin office, has long urged the EU to ban Hezbollah in its entirety. In numerous high-level meetings, op-eds, and interviews, we have been a consistent voice on this issue, as some of our European diplomats and officials on this call know all too well, and therefore we very much welcome that Germany took this important step. Let's maybe begin with Lukas. What is your reaction to this development? And do you think we may see other European countries following Germany's example, specifically maybe also in your homeland, Austria?
Thank you, first of all, for the invite and for this online gathering today on this crucial topic, which also became a breaking news topic, I would say, due to this German decision, which I appreciate very, very much. People who know something about some kind of friendly rivalry between Germany and Austria know it's pretty rare that Austrians applaud Germans. But today I really have to applaud Germany for this right decision at the right time. And it was not only a decision by the executive branch in Germany, by the government, but they already took action last night and went to some of these terrorists. And I would say I'm dealing with them now on the base of our knowledge that Hezbollah entirely is a terrorist organization. It's anti-Semitic. It's entirely against what we call European values, is against actually universal values like human dignity, individual freedom, rule of law, and everything we fight for. And that's why I'm running a European Parliament, of course, with colleagues from many different groups, for the clear decision from EU side also to ban Hezbollah entirely, which will be an important signal that Europe, I would say, is serious with its own values and its own approach to things. In my home country and constituency, Austria, we have in the member state parliament, in the national parliament, on the table an amendment which will be most probably debated, discussed, and also voted in May, also regarding the ban of Hezbollah in its entirety. And this would be a parliamentary decision then, which would be, I would say, as always, parliamentary decisions are on behalf of the citizens of Austria, but still I appreciate Germany going in the forefront on a governmental base and taking action already. And I want to be clear on that. I have some colleagues from different member states in European Parliament who are afraid that maybe the diplomatic relations with Beirut could be harmed by such a decision. But in my view, a true, really European foreign policy would be even stronger if we work together with reliable partners who in Lebanon who understand that we would never support a terrorist organization.
Right. Nicola Beer, your party, the Free Democrats, and yourself, although in opposition, were really also at the forefront of calling in Germany for such a ban. How do you explain a little bit why is it that your party, and specifically also Germany, has taken the lead here on this discussion?
Because it's a question of values, and because we have to stand also for our attitude. I mean, for Germany, I think the relation to Israel is again some special, and to fight for the freedom and also for the security of Israel is really something in the DNA of a free democratic politician. And so we are working for several years to ban Hezbollah, and we're very proud after that the German administrative court said that they can be taken under supervision, observation, that then we at the end could convince big majority of German parliament to ban it also in its entire organizations. So not only the military, but also the political arms, because this is really an artificial division. And so it passed, German Bundestag passed last December a resolution. And now what we see as action today from our Minister of Internal Affairs is just to get these then on the executive side in action. And I really was happy to hear that this morning that he took this action and that we can go further. I mean, sometimes it's a quite complicated question of laws, as Hezbollah has no official organizations, not in Germany, but clearly works through other civilian organizations or mosques or whatever to spread out their anti-Semitic poison. And so now we have the base to go behind this, to accuse it in the courts, and so we can really work against it. And Lukas, Mandl is totally right. We have now to go further also on the European levels. I mean, there are several member states in European Union, which as Netherlands, for example, which also have the same ban. But it's not in all the member states. So we have some more discussions with all the other friends of European delegations and European Parliament, with some of the governments, and especially also with European Commission. There only the military arm of Hezbollah is banned for the moment because of the fear that to ban it entirely could destabilize the situation in Lebanon. I think this is not true. We have to stand here for our attitudes and for our values, as Lukas mentioned. And let me maybe at the end express my hope that the German government will take the opportunity, as it has the European presidency and up from the 1st of July, to take this topic in the council and to discuss with the other member states and also with those governments which have problems in these questions of a total ban on European level, because we need there also the whole European Union to go against any form of anti-Semitic, anti-Israel politics, and it's clear that Hezbollah is an example for that.
Right. Mike, some of the standard reasons why the EU so far has resisted the call to ban Hezbollah in its entirety, we've addressed it a little bit already. One is the idea that it would make it difficult, supposedly, to remain to keep diplomatic contacts with the Lebanese government. Now, the United States has had has banned Hezbollah for a long time and enjoys close relationships with the government. Some in the United States may even argue too close. The other argument that has also been mentioned is that supposedly it could destabilize Lebanon. Now, we've witnessed widespread protests in Lebanon before the corona outbreak with the lockdown. Those demonstrations naturally died down, but they have come back rather violently in the last couple of days. What is the role that Hezbollah is playing in the protest, or as one of the reasons of the protest, Mike?
Well, good morning. Before I answer that, just let me say thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here with you, Daniel, and on what a fantastic day it is. I mean, congratulations to all of you who have been working toward this decision. I think it's a great decision, and I'm very happy to see that it's moving us in the closer direction of European American agreement on a kind of common strategic picture, which has been missing. We're not there yet, but we don't, as Nicola said, we don't yet have a common EU position, really. But Germany moving in this direction is just fantastic, and I'm sure that the common EU position will follow soon. With respect to your question, Hezbollah is, I mean, this question about destabilization of Lebanon. Lebanon is being destabilized by the financial crisis there, which is the result of years and years of mismanagement and, frankly, Hezbollah domination of the political system there. Hezbollah's goal right now in the crisis is simply to avoid blame, particularly by its own constituents. I mean, its own its own hardcore constituents, but then also the constituents of its larger coalition that it represents. To avoid blame for the financial crisis. There's a there's a lot of, we just saw in the last couple of days, a lot of anger on the streets toward the banks. So what Hezbollah media is doing is it's starting to talk about the party of the banks, which of course is Hariri and the establishment, all as if Hezbollah is not part of the establishment. But I mean, we know that it is, but it is playing this game of trying to deflect populist anger away from itself and toward other parties in the Lebanese system. It's very hard for me from this great distance of Washington D.C. to Lebanon to know how successful that rhetoric, the populist rhetoric that Hezbollah is using, how successful it is. But I think it's clear that it's not unsuccessful. I think one can say that clearly, that certainly among its own supporters, they're buying that notion. Among the Aunists, they're buying that notion, and so the populist anger has not been directed sharply at Hezbollah, but there is, I think, and we saw this even before the severe economic meltdown. Since the protests began in October, we've seen that that the people are dissatisfied with the entire spoils system in the Lebanese government, and they fully recognize that Hezbollah is a mainstay, if not the mainstay of that whole spoils system. So I think everyone in Lebanon right now is playing this blame game to try to deflect attention. Nobody has a real answer to the crisis, and we just kind of have to watch and see how it goes.
Right. Before we continue, I ought to remind our audience that there will be an opportunity later on to ask questions. You have we are all now experts in Zoom webinars. You have a Q&A button where you can type your questions, which we will get to in about maybe 15-20 minutes. Now, it is difficult, of course, to discuss Hezbollah in isolation. It is a proxy of Iran's, and Iran, and particularly the nuclear agreement, is subject to a to a transatlantic dispute, and we should not now relitigate the U.S. decision to withdraw from the JCPOA, because at the same time as there is disagreement about the nuclear deal, there is at least rhetorically agreement on both sides of the Atlantic that there is a need to confront Iran's aggression in the region. Iran's support for terrorism, including for Hezbollah and other proxies, and Iran's very own terrorism, as Europe itself has experienced last year, a number of assassinations and bomb attempts. Now, there is an important issue coming up now with the arms embargo that will, according to the UN resolution that is tied to the JCPOA, that turned a permanent arms embargo into a temporary one, and it is now about to be lifted in October. Hey, Lukas, if you want to take a first step here, how perhaps both Europe and the United States, neither of which can have an interest in the Iranians buying advanced weapons from China or Russia or both, how to address this issue?
First of all, we all have to understand, of course, we today understand this, but we always have to spread the message that Hezbollah is a proxy of Iran. And Iran is using various proxies. Maybe Hezbollah is the largest and strongest one. And that's why it's always important to keep Iran without nuclear weapons. And generally to, I would say, oversee what Iran does in order to protect actually not only Israel. It's also important to talk about. We are talking about a security threat to all the world, especially also to Europe, as you have already mentioned. There have been attacks by Hezbollah and other terrorist groups, especially Hezbollah, also in Europe. So we are not only talking about Israel, not only talking about the Middle East, but about also Europe and the whole world when it comes to security threats from their sides. And in this case, I guess all the Western world on the transatlantic line, I would say, agree that we have to keep Iran away from nuclear weapons. But the way to reach that, there we have different opinions. As we all know, the European Union intends to remain with this, what we call nuclear deal, because that's what it is. It should that Iran establish its own nuclear weapons. And yeah, the US administration is against it and claims that there could be a better deal. But since we have the deal, it was not only negotiated in Vienna, it was strongly supported by the that time US government. We should do everything we can to remind Iran on keeping with its obligations that come along with this deal. And that means to avoid Iran as a nuclear power state, which must not happen at all, because this would be an even larger threat than we have ever experienced before.
Nicola Beer, would you like to add to this?
Yes, but Lukas elaborated it in a way I totally support. I mean, this is a really complicated situation, but we have to make sure that these atomic arms are not in the region and cannot be used. So I can understand that the deal could every time be better, but we have to make the first steps. And I'm a little bit worried that now the situation became again more complicated. I understand also that Israel is not really happy about all the details of the deal, also because it's in the first step time limited. But I think we have to take first steps to work for this security, so that the arms are not in Iran, that they are not threatening the region, and afterwards going further and further and further when the first base of trust is installed. And maybe this is the key question, that we get a base of trust. And this became now more and more difficult, I think, also because the political leaders are now behaving in the way we can see, and this gets the situation worse and worse. But maybe we can restart also by the help of European Union, and I hope really that this can be maybe a moderator for the situation, because we have all the interest not to have this danger in the region, because it's not only a question of the region, but especially for Israel, it's really a big danger for the whole world, and so far also for Europe.
Mike, the US is apparently threatening to invoke the so-called snapback part of the UN resolution, unless there is an agreement in the Security Council to extend the arms embargo. There's no legal debate of whether the US is actually entitled to do so, since it withdrew from the JCPOA, but maybe you can unravel this a little bit about for us and explain what would the US indeed sort of make good on this threat if there is no resolution on this issue.
I think they certainly would make good on it if there's no resolution of the issue. I fully agree with what Lukas and Nicola said. In fact, I feel like I'm not having a transatlantic discussion here, because I'm so used to having these familiar debates about whether whether containing Iran is is wise, possible, feasible, and so on. The U.S. tendency, and especially this administration's tendency, is to see the JCPOA as a great boon to Iranian power, not just its nuclear program, but also its conventional power around the region, and that perception is becoming intensified by the realization that the arms embargo on Iran is going to be lifted under the terms of the JCPOA in October. So I think the administration is very serious about that, and the recent effort by the Iranians to drive the American forces out of Iraq, and this is how it's understood in Washington, I mean in this administration, is it's not independent Iraqi actors on the ground trying to do that. It's all orchestrated from Tehran. That has, I think, combined with the attacks on Saudi Arabia and shipping in the Gulf, that has focused the mind of the administration pretty clearly on the conventional threat that Iran represents, and on the need of countering it and deterring Iran. And so I take the threat very seriously. You say there's a legal debate. I don't think it's a serious legal debate, because the UN Security Council Resolution 2231 defines America as a participant in the JCPOA. So under that, under the authority or under the designations of the U.S., the legal definition of the U.S. In Resolution 2231, the U.S. is acting or threatening to invoke snapback. The claim is that, well, the U.S. renounced renounced 223 or renounced the JCPOA. Therefore, its position as a participant in the JCPOA is null and void. But it's just false. It's a legal that's a confusion of a policy and political language with legal language. Legally, the U.S. is a participant in the JCPOA according to UN Security Council Resolution 2231, and the U.S. is taking action in the Security Council on that basis. I don't think people can make the argument that it's false, but I don't think it will stand up in any serious scrutiny.
Right. This might be a good time to get to our questions from our audience. First of all, a question whether you anticipate that Germany's action will provoke violence against the Jewish community in Germany or elsewhere in Europe. I presume violence from Hezbollah members. Is Germany taking special precautions to ensure the safety of its Jewish community and Jewish institutions in Germany? Nicola Beer, maybe this would be a good question for you if you've heard anything about these kinds of concerns.
Yes, I can understand it. I mean, we try really to have a high security level on all Jewish organizations, Jewish communities, synagogues, and as far as I can see, this is really a good organized system. On the other hand, to be honest, for me, especially as a German, it's always a bad feeling when I see how all the synagogues, Jewish kindergarten, and so on has to be protected so that they cannot live in a normal openness to society as they want to be as part of German society. Because I mean, these are Germans that all the other Germans are, and we're living together with so many nationalities in Germany in a big tolerance, and so this is quite bipolar feeling to see how it's necessary to protect so that the attacks, as we saw in Halle, cannot be successful at the end. And we saw that Halle, for example, was an example where police security was not enough. I think that after Halle, this was against they optimized the system, and so I think we should be prepared. But I'm quite, without knowing it directly, I'm quite sure that also our Minister for Internal Affairs and the ministers on the state level in Germany had the information before and then also informed the security system to protect Jewish communities, synagogues, and so on. And on the second level, I think just this action now will at the end have more security for Jewish and Israeli organizations and people, because we try to get them by police and to put them to court and put them in jail for the action they are planning in behind the scenes. And I mean, this is always a source of attacks. And so this is a threat for the whole society. And so we have to act on this way as they did it. And I'm very happy that we will continue on this path.
Very good. The next question is, why did it take so long to ban Hezbollah? Commendable as it is, of course, and why are EU countries reticent to follow Germany's examples? We addressed some of the issues, but maybe Lukas, if you want to sort of reiterate some of the issues that are
generally, I guess, due to several reasons. The relation between Israel and Europe has to become better. And if we want to be optimistic on a day like today, we can say it already became better in the last years. I would really claim that Austria and the Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz has a leadership role into that procedure and into the whole process. Of course, I can, as an Austrian citizen, really underline that the relation between Austria and Israel became better. It is better today than ever before. And I guess more and more Europeans have to understand today that it's in the European interest. It's not a gift or something to provide a 9 million country with, but it's in the European interest, not only in security matters, which are our issue today, but also in economic matters and in innovation matters and in technology and in many other fields, to stick together with Israel, because Israel is the only rule of law state, the only democracy in the Middle East, and is the state that represents what we call the European values, which should actually be Western values or universal values, represent these values in the Middle East. So this is the hour of action, I would say. And of course, it's a question for historians to figure out why it took so long. that things, let's say, move. But I'm happy that they move, obviously, after the German decision, and also due to many colleagues from different groups who gave their signatures for banning Hezbollah in its entirety. And on a day like today, I hope it's true to claim that things move into the right direction now.
Right.
Daniel, can I take a stab at that question?
Please. Sure.
Thanks. I don't know that I have the answer, but I have impressions. I spent 4 years in government, and from 2005 to 9, and I've talked to a lot of European diplomats on a regular basis since then, and I have a couple of impressions. Again, I don't want to say that I know the answer exactly, but I think my impression is that there's been a split in the German system between the foreign ministry and the interior ministry. The interior ministry sees the connection of Hezbollah to terrorism. It sees its connection to crime and drug networks on the ground in Germany, and would like to just roll it up. The foreign ministry is putting it in a different frame. One, there is a significant difference of opinion between the United States and the Germans, and particularly the German foreign ministry, about how to handle the Iran threat. As I said, the U.S. sees the Iran threat as a hard power threat, and it thinks in terms of containing with the traditional tools of military containment. The Germans are much more inclined, particularly the foreign ministry, to try to engage with Iran and to keep all channels of communication open. And they believe that positive engagement, and particularly economic engagement, changes the calculus in Tehran and creates a better international environment, and one in which we can get more from the Iranians than sort of traditional containment that the Americans favor. And in addition, there's always a tendency, you see, I see it over here in the American system as well, but it's very pronounced in the European system, to make a big distinction between Hezbollah and Iran. For the Iran containment contingent within the Trump administration, Hezbollah is, for all intents and purposes, it's a light infantry division of the Quds force of Iran. I mean, that's certainly how I see it. I don't think any major decisions are made by Nasrallah that aren't okayed out of Tehran, and I don't think Nasrallah ever, gets out of step with Tehran. But it's very convenient for Tehran to pretend that it's not in total control of Hezbollah, but a lot of actors in the Middle East and in Europe and in the United States too are inclined to think that you can drive a wedge between that Hezbollah is first and foremost a Lebanese militia and not an Iranian an offshoot of the Iranian Quds force, and you can drive a wedge between them. You can create tensions and so forth, and that then favors the principle of engagement over containment. And finally, the Germans play a role in Israeli Hezbollah negotiations over, lost soldiers and hostages and questions such as that. And I think the foreign ministry values the role of intermediary that the Germans play.
Thank you, Mike. Here's an interesting question that I would like to address to both Nicola and Lukas. How we might be more effective in talking to governments of other European countries to follow the example of Germany. So how to do better advocacy. Do you as you yourself, lawmakers, what works, what doesn't work?
I think we have now a window of opportunity, not only because of the German presidency, and we know that the priorities for this second half year of 2020 will change because of the virus, because of the crisis which is now there, because of the virus. But I think it's really an opportunity behind the scenes to talk about how to come further, as far as because we have a situation where I think whole Europe knows, especially the political leaders in the different capitals, that if we want really to play a geopolitical force, we have to stay together with one position. I mean, we have so often seen situations not only in the near or far east, also in other things happens around the world, that everybody reacts, and Europe takes about 1 week up to a reaction of the president of the commission or the high representative. This is not acceptable. And so we need more decisions which are not by unanimity in the council. We need really to have a clear base also for foreign politics, for security politics, and then to empower the high representative of the European Union to act in this way. And so I think this is now something which we also already saw around the last European elections, where people in the different member states really asked for it to be a European power. Maybe also because the role of the US changed under the new administration and under the new president. And people hope that Europe now will stand up and help to work for a better world of more multilateralism and less war. And so I think this is not possible if you have always 27 different positions, but then you have to create one force, and it has to react consistent and quick. And this is maybe now the time, not only for the Hezbollah and the Iran question, but also for those problems and challenges to strengthen European Union, to strengthen the High Representative, to become more something as a foreign minister than only somebody who discusses and then is not able to really speak for European Union.
I totally agree with, thank you, Daniel. I totally agree with what Nicola has already said, and I maybe want to add some thoughts. If I had to put in a nutshell what I really want to contribute to, then this is Europe with more strength to the outside and more freedom to the inside. And that's something, okay, High Representative Bell has to work on, but I guess the Commission President herself has to do the same. And the whole Commission, since it claims to be the very first geopolitical commission in history, should, let's say, be more oriented to the outside and work on these issues. That's the first step that seems important to me when it comes to the European level itself. But the question you read out, Daniel, also mentioned the member states. And I guess we have to clearly draw the picture of alternatives to the member states. Because what was wrong in the past and what remains wrong for the future is a European Union that does not decide at all. And in many different cases, when it comes to global policy and foreign policy, European Union is not yet in the position to decide. And then others decide for us. And we are the ones who have to follow others, and we are not in the leading role then. And we have to become in the leading role, not for selfish reasons, but for the sake of our values and for the sake of our economy and of our welfare and of we can contribute to in the world, or even when it comes to oppressed and when it comes to starvation now, for example, after the pandemic crisis. So there are many different good reasons for Europe is in a better condition to decide, because it's the same in political life as in private life. Not to decide at all, or even not to decide on time, means you found yourself in a dead-end road after everything. It's something I don't wish for Europe. And the alternative is clear in that case, to come back to the question itself. Member states, the Council, the Commission, we in the Parliament all have to understand that it's not negotiable to fight anti-Semitism. It's not negotiable to fight terrorism. The alternatives are clear, and it's clear where Europe has to stand. If it sticks to its own values and what it claims to be the European way of life. And that's why we really live in a crucial time when decisions like that have to be taken. Again, on a day like this, I'm pretty optimistic that we move forward.
Thank you. We have a question here. Do you think the new government in Israel is now able to fight Hezbollah in the border region better? I assume as a result of Germany's decision. That one decision may not be enough, but let's maybe assume there were a total EU ban against Hezbollah. Mike, what would be the repercussions for Hezbollah? Maybe already after this pretty heavy blow coming from Germany, the biggest economy in the EU.
I think for Hezbollah, it's a blow. It's a huge blow to its status, and it's really in a difficult position right now. I don't want to overstate it. I don't want to overstate the difficulty of the position it's in. But Lebanon is in an unprecedented crisis in general, and the crisis presents Hezbollah with many tremendous challenges, and so this comes at a bad time. The United States is saying clearly that they're not going to look favorably on a bailout for Lebanon as long as Hezbollah has this privileged, I would say even dominant position in the government and in the whole system over there. Exactly what the U.S. means by that is not clear. I mean, what the precise conditionality of American support for a bailout would be is unclear. But it's a severe problem for Hezbollah. Hezbollah needs the bailout just like everybody else does, but Hezbollah, as I said, also needs to make sure that it isn't blamed in Lebanon for the crisis, for the economic crisis that the country is experiencing, and I think it should be our goal, collectively, the goal of the United States and the goal of the Europeans and the Americans together, to make sure that the Lebanese people understand that the crisis was precipitated to a very significant extent by Hezbollah, by its policies, by its connection to the banks in Lebanon, and by its willingness to use Lebanon as a base for Iranian activities. So it's a very serious challenge to Hezbollah. I don't think it's going to change the military dynamic between Israel and Hezbollah all that much, because that dynamic, we've seen it for years now, and it is really defined more than anything else by the fact that Hezbollah has between 100 and 150,000 rockets and missiles provided primarily by Iran, which Iran is turning into precision-guided weaponry, and that has a deterrent effect on the Israelis. So there's a lot of tit for tat that goes on between Israel and Hezbollah, but Israeli actions are limited toward trying to prevent the precision-guided upgrade of Hezbollah's arsenal, not to really going after Hezbollah in general. And I don't think this decision will change that.
Right. We have a question here. Considering Germany's action against Hezbollah, might the European Union, using Germany as an example, move to encourage other member states to follow suit? Creating a more unified effort over a greater geopolitical era, further to weaken Hezbollah's efforts in Europe? Are we going to see, hopefully, in my view, a domino effect? Will other member states follow? Lukas.
I hope really that German government is now very active in the time as it has the role of the presidency in the second half of this year. I know that different member states have historical tied relations to Lebanon, for example, as we see with France and so on. So there the discussions have to be a little bit, full of pressure, and you have to discuss a little bit more maybe than with other countries, as we see for Austria, for example, which will hopefully have the total ban very soon, and as for the Netherlands. But I think we can have a common approach on this, as we see that it's quite important also for the situation of Israel in the region as the only democratic state. Because when we freeze all the assets, when no criminal and also no legal business is possible in Europe, then we will try out Hezbollah, which has a lot of money to finance all these attacks, to finance the military arm. And then, then we have also as a European Union to have a new strategy for the Lebanon, because we see that Hezbollah is also working through a social network. So people in Lebanon depend on money coming from social organizations from the Hezbollah, and then we should establish other networks, financing other networks with European money and not giving European money in bad hands. And so I think you have always to be optimistic. We see you only can work step by step, but more the steps you do, the longer you go further. And so I'm really hoping that this can follow up.
Thank you very much. We have a...
Maybe Lukas want to add? No?
Maybe one sentence, because it's no surprise that I agree. But I guess we have to lead the member states on a path, let's say maybe within a period of a few months or even a year, on a path where member states will have to respond to the question why they don't ban Hezbollah entirely, rather more than today's maybe answering the question why they do ban Hezbollah. So that's the thing we have to work on, and I'm optimistic that European Parliament will be in a leadership role here and go in the forefront and be hopefully a good example for the member states, as Germany, Austria, for example, already are in this case.
Well, you initiated a transatlantic cross-parliamentary call to ban Hezbollah, and Nicola Beer signed it. Well over 50 lawmakers from both sides of the Atlantic. So I think there is certainly momentum here. I have a question from a participant. Do you see a future connection between Hezbollah and Hamas with Iranian mentor? This would create another danger to Israel. I think that link already exists. Mike, do you want to elaborate on this?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the link already exists. Each one of them is operating in their own, specific area, and it has its own kind of demands. But they are part of I think a coordinated effort by Tehran to encircle Israel with hostile actors, so that Iran can continually pose as a spoiler for any major initiative by Israel, and most important of all, prevent Israel from attacking Iran's nuclear facilities.
Right. We're coming now to our last question from one of our attendees. He or she is writing, by banning the military wing, the distinction between military and political wing being anyway arbitrary, or so some say, the EU already has the tools to seize any funds and to clamp down on any activity deemed illegal. What would a complete ban by the EU on Hezbollah bring in practical terms besides a strong political message? Now, I think that is not quite correct. As a matter of fact, the distinction between military and political wing means that, as a matter of fact, the EU cannot simply seize funds and clamp down on other activities. But Lukas, maybe you want to elaborate on this.
Yeah, thank you for already mentioning something, and I just want to add, of course, still talking about a terrorist wing and a political wing means that we talk to people which we assume to be the political wing, which are not reliable, but unreliable and actually criminals and terrorists, or even funding terrorists. And that means it makes a huge difference politically and diplomatically, who we talk to and who we call reliable. That's a huge difference for many, I would say, years and decades ahead. And that's why it's important to talk about Hezbollah and ban it in its entirety.
And I think it's important to say that the whole organization operates under the same leadership. So it follows the same commands and the same objectives. Even if it's not on the forehand, it's not clearly military, but it is supporting by the system. I mean, we clearly see that all the social organization financed by the so-called political arm of Hezbollah in Lebanon is getting people in favor of Hezbollah as a whole entity. And so gaining from there the support also for the military branch. I really cannot stand seeing that European money is going in these so-called civilian part, because I think we really should install liable partners in the region, giving them the money, because the Lebanon people need it, really need it. And they see that their situation is not as they want to have it, but for the moment there is no other so-called help as these other arm of the Hezbollah, and we have to break the circle so that we get installed help really directly to reliable partners, but not indirectly then supporting the military arm of the Hezbollah. And so both is needed, not only to freeze assets and put business done on European spots under control, but also to stop giving money down, which is indirectly a help, a support for the anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli work of the Hezbollah.
Daniel, can I add a word there?
Sure. Concluding last sentence.
My last sentence. I always love it when we get diplomatic language closer to reality. And I just think, just for countries as for individuals, it's always better when you can actually talk about things as they really are and as you really see them. When you start creating these fictions and you start behaving in accordance with the fictions, at a certain point you actually start to believe them, even if you knew you didn't believe them when you started. And we do this a lot in the Middle East, and it's not just within the military wing and the political wing. We also, you know, the United States, we won't interact with Hezbollah, but we will interact with Nabi Berri, and we'll start, because we're using Berri as an interlocutor or intermediary. We start telling ourselves that somehow we're weakening Hezbollah by doing this, and Hezbollah dominates the whole system in Lebanon, and it can designate people to go talk to us and be intermediaries. We should be aware of what's happening. We're not weakening Hezbollah. We're not working around it. We're not building up other sectors. We're just giving them a fig leaf, which we shouldn't, which they don't deserve. If we want to give them a fig leaf for some well-defined purpose of our own, that's all well and good. But let's not get into this world where we start thinking that the fig leaf is actually something other than what it is.
All right, Mike. Thank you very much to the panelists. Fantastic discussion. Nicola Beer, Lukas Mandl, Mike Doran. A great thank you to our audience from across the world. And if I may step over the briefly over my role as a moderator, I would encourage very much everybody on this webinar to take a good look at the German Interior Minister's very detailed explanation of why they took that step. And I think it is very convincing and would leave very little room for other member states to decide otherwise. I hope you will tune in again to our next webinar. We have a very interesting seminar coming up next week, a transatlantic discussion between members of the European Parliament and members of Congress. In the meantime, please stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope to see you all in person very soon. Goodbye.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
All the
Thank
best.
you.
Bye-bye.